So thank you for being here and to have a conversation about what men can do to end violence against women. And should we start with you introducing yourself, Jonathan? Would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Okay, my name is Jonathan Wam. I'm a social worker with HOME. HOME is the humanitarian organization for migration economics. So we are an NGO that looks into the rights and welfare of migrant workers. So we work with the domestic worker community to provide social support services for them and also to advocate on issues which concern them, issues relating to their working conditions, to their welfare, their safety, and we provide shelters for women migrant workers who are victims of abuse and exploitation, and those who are also victims of trafficking and forced labor.
Right, so I'm Sean Francis. I'm the marketing officer at Project X, which is an organization that deals with sex workers' rights. So as marketing officer, one of the things that I handle is coming up with and initiating campaigns like the one that we did a few months ago called Our Boys to Bullies. And that was a campaign about calling out this cultural practice among secondary school children, where we saw these secondary school kids going down to places like Changi Village, just to look for transgender people, look for sex workers and harass them either verbally or physically. So we wanted to get that out in the public domain. I also work on responding to cases and documenting cases of human rights abuse. We go down to the red light districts in Singapore, and we try to find out what's going on the ground. We document it for reports, and also we try to respond as quickly as I can. So that could be anything from information, getting AFA down, or responding in whatever way that we can. Yeah.
So this is responding to cases, incidents where sex workers face abuse.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Benny Bong. I work as a family and marital therapist. So part of my work involves helping couples who are in relationships where there's been domestic violence. Sometimes it's to try to help them resolve the difficulties without it turning violent. And sometimes in some situations it may be to advise individuals to leave those relationships where it's become very dangerous for them. Part of my work also involves training of professionals, social workers, counselors, on how they can also continue to do this service. The other hat that I wear is a voluntary hat with the Society Against Family Violence. And one of the projects that we have done over the years has been to look at the incidence of violence in our little island. Unfortunately, it's not all calm and peaceful. About 10% of women who were surveyed reported that they experienced directly violence of a physical and sometimes of a sexual nature.
And this is a study of that particular figure was of male violence, right?
It was primarily violence experienced by women in the hands of their male partners, whether existing or previous partners.
Could you share some insights from that survey that you found particularly important to focus on?
Well, the survey opened up some surprises for us. We did expect to see violence that is of a higher nature with low income, with individuals with less education. We saw that. So in the rental flats, in the one-room flats, we saw a high incidence. But what surprised us was that there was not just a downward trend. We saw actually a U-shaped kind of a graph. So the higher the education, there seemed to be an increase in the violence. The more the household income was, there was also an increase in violence. So that sort of challenged our idea that violence is just something that couples or families with low income or no education would experience.
Right. And how did you come to doing the work that you do?
Oh, it was really a point of embarrassment. I was working in a counseling agency, and a colleague of mine who was working with us from India, he said, "So do you see clients who experience domestic violence?" And this was about 25 years ago. So on the tip of my tongue, I wanted to say no. But I paused and I thought, well, I do see women who are depressed. I do see women who are suicidal. And then I thought to myself, oh, why are they depressed and suicidal? Because they were living with a violent partner. So I found myself saying, yes. And then his next question was, so what do you do for these women? And again, I realized that whatever answer I was going to give was totally inadequate. We tried to counsel them to be less provocative to their husbands, to be more tolerant of his violent behavior. And that was not the right thing to say to victims of violence. And so that was my moment of epiphany to wake up and to say that something more should be done.
So what's the approach now? If it's not to say, modify the victim's behavior?
Well, now we take a more systemic view, meaning that we look at it as a relationship between a perpetrator and a victim of violence. And in some situations, that dynamic has to end. In some situations where the parties, for whatever reason, choose to stay, want to stay, and they choose to stay not because they have no choice, but maybe because of a loving relationship or whatever may be the case, then we look at how can this violent cycle end? And we look at what both parties can do.
John, how did you come to doing the work you do?
Okay. It's quite personal actually because my family used to hire and still hires actually live-in domestic workers. So as a child, I grew up with live-in domestic workers, and that gave me an insight into the kinds of problems and challenges that they face. Because I used to, my parents used to put me together in the same room when I was a child to sleep with my domestic worker. So I used to talk to her a lot. So that gave me a very good insight into some of the difficulties that she faced. And also, I was very chatty as a child, so I used to talk a lot to her at night and prevented her from going to sleep. So when I think about it now, how terrible that might have felt for her, because not only did she have to do a lot of work during the day, but at night she also had to entertain this spoiled brat that was just prattling away at night. So, and subsequently, when my parents started to hire other domestic workers, and we would have discussions about their rights and how they should be treated, I became very concerned with one particular incident which happened, which is when my mom decided to allow our live-in domestic worker, at the time she was an Indonesian domestic worker, allow her to go out on a weekly day off. And then her friends started to scold her and say, why are you doing that? If you allow her to go out for her day off, she's going to have a Bangladeshi boyfriend, she's going to get pregnant, and she's going to learn all kinds of bad things, and worst of all, she's going to gossip to all the other domestic workers and insist, and then all the other domestic workers will start insisting on having their weekly days off too. So when I thought about that at the time as a child, I was very disturbed because I didn't want to go to school every day, so why did I expect our live-in domestic worker to want to work for us every single day? So I also heard stories from my mom about agencies who were violent towards the domestic workers. There was one story she told of an agent who threatened to throw a chair at a domestic worker. So these kinds of stories really sensitized me to the plight of these women. So that made me want to do something about the situation. So that was how I got involved.
Great. Sean, how did you come to doing what you do?
Mine's a lousy story. Frankly, I think the more interesting story for me is why I stayed. Why I got into the work that I do really was because I just graduated and I felt like I wanted to do something meaningful. So I just looked up all the civil society groups and I just wanted to see which cause was the most behind. So I just looked all the way down, okay, sex workers' rights. I mean that's something that nobody hears about. So I was like, okay, yes, I'm going to pick that because it seems like they're not they haven't progressed as much and they could use more stuff. So I went there. So it was a lousy reason to join, so to speak. But why I stayed, I think was was a lot stronger for me in the sense that I was barely a week or two into volunteering that I saw the first case of violence. You know, and then a month in, there was this big case that TOC reported as well about men who were going down to the red light districts and paying the girls with counterfeit notes and making money off of them. So they would pay the girls with these counterfeit notes, have the services, enjoy the services, and they would actually take back change from the girls. So the girls were actually losing money. So when you see it with your own eyes, that hits you. And then you start to realize, okay, it's not just because I sat down with a list and said this we use Motel. It's because these are real human beings that I smoke with, that I have dinner with,